and welcome to the third installment in the XL Power Specter V2 700 build series. Alright, we're going to talk about servos today. We have to install our rearmost cyclic servo as well as our tail servo into the upper fuselage section, as what it calls for next in the manual. So we're going to go ahead and get those done. We're going to get sort of all of our servo horns installed and set up today and centered, and we're going to talk a little bit about Theta servos and their programmability. So servos I'm going to use in this helicopter. This is the Theta Razer C1 Cyclic servo. It's Theta's top of the line cyclic servo in the full size. It does include NFC technology, that's near field communication, and what that means is with the use of the Theta app in an Android cell phone, it's not available for iPhone, I'm sorry to say, but it is only available on an Android. This is a cheap Samsung S7 Android phone I picked up off of eBay just for this purpose. It's literally the only thing I use this phone for. I think of it kind of like a programmer box, honestly. And we're going to actually program the center point, because as you all know, when we install these servo horns on the servos, we're not going to be able to get them perfectly at 90 degrees. Now, a lot of FBLs have center point adjustments in them that you would tweak this with, but we're actually going to use the Theta app to get these set as close to 90 degrees perfectly as we can. And then if need be, we can always add some more adjustment in the FBL. But in the past, when I've done this and I get my servos perfectly at 90 degrees, I actually have zero subtrim or adjustment in the FBL. So with that, let's go ahead and take a quick look at the manual here. You can see here, this is the rear cyclic servo, I believe, at this point. And then we're going to do the tail servo on the next page. And you can see we're going to go ahead and get the servo facing in a downward orientation, meaning the shaft is at the bottom of the servo, and then we'll angle our servo horn to the right here at 90 degrees. So with that, let's go ahead and just mock that up. So one of the first things you'll need is a servo tester. I have a handy dandy one here. Many of the sort of battery checkers on the market also will have servo test capabilities. This one is a Spectrum unit I've had for forever. We're going to go ahead and set this to 1520 for our cyclic servo. And we'll get this plugged in. And I actually like, here's a little trick. This little dot means that's the side the signal wire goes on, which on a Theta servo is the white wire here. And I do that so I don't have to read the tiny little lettering printed in black on black. So I'm just going to run this from left to right, back to center, just to make sure it's working, and it is. And then I'm going to orient it like so, just like it is in the manual. And when it's going downward, we want to get the servo horn here. So I'm going to try and find the spline that gets me the closest to 90 degrees, and I think that's it. And as you can see, that's not anywhere close to perfectly 90 degrees. It's close-ish, but not super close. So we are going to go ahead now and bump our servo. So I'm going to take the Theta app on the phone. Alright, I'm going to go to the Theta app. And when you open it, you're going to see, you sort of get this new screen, you know, updates about new servos and things that are coming out. But you'll see up here in the top it says parameter, and that's where we're going to want to click right now. And there are some great guides available on YouTube. The US team manager, Ting Yang Meng, has done some great videos on the subject I highly recommend for this. So what we're going to do now is take the servo and we're going to bump it to the back of the phone. And it says read success here. So now I've got all of the settings here on the servo. I could reverse it, I could change it from 1520 to 760 if I was, say, using this with a Futaba FBL system that can run cyclics at 760. You can change a lot of the parameters. All we're going to do today is just focus on the center point. So I'm going to go ahead and click the startup button here, which means the servo is going to read the point we started up at, and then I'm going to write to the servo. So I'm going to press the little right servo, and it says hold your servo on the bottom, which we've done. And every now and then it says operation fail, in which case you just do it again, give it a try. That one says write success, so we know that's good. So now I can go ahead and set the 90 degree center point on the servo. So I'm going to run my square here. Now the servo has a handy 90 degree point marked on the case. It's quite accurate, so I'm going to use my square lined up there, and then I'm going to get this lined up so that my square is lined up with the servo horn, and I want to be able to see the center of the square right through the window. I know this is kind of hard for you to see perfectly here, but that gives you a rough idea. And we're going to get this. Now some folks have these cool 3D printed sort of slide-on covers that get this just a little bit more accurate, but for my purposes, this is going to get me real close. So that looks great, especially once I take the square away and just look at it again. So now what we're going to do is go ahead and power it back up so the servo reads its startup point. And there we have it. Our servo is now set. So when it powers up, you can see it didn't move there, but this is the 90-degree point. It's just that simple. I'm going to go ahead and do that for the rest of our servos, and then we'll go ahead and get these Loctited and installed. Okay, so we got our rearward cyclic servo, which I always want to call the elevator servo. I know some people don't like that for whatever reason, but I don't mind it. We're going to get our tail servo plugged in just a second. We're just going to get our servo tester set to 760 first. There it is. And there's that plugged in. So again, we're going to use a slightly different servo horn here. And looking at the manual here real quick, you can see that we're going to want the servo shaft for the tail servo at the top. And then the servo horn is going to go straight down 90 degrees. With our servo plugged into our tester, we're going to run it in all directions, make sure it's there. Now we've got it back at center. We're going to take our servo horn and try and get it. It's going to point straight down over the body of the servo, like so. And then we want to get the one that's closest to 90 degrees, and I'm fairly certain that that's this one. And then we're going to have to now bump this servo with the app. So it's reading the servo now. Now, you'll see it says login servo. Now what that means is it's the first time I've bumped this particular servo. And it's going to ask me to bump it again, and it says login success, and now it's read all the parameters. This servo is basically now registered to me. When I registered the Theta app, it logs the servo into my account, so Theta knows that I have this servo. Now, why do they do that? The only reason they do it is not to track how many servos or anything else you want to think of. Literally, the only reason that there's this little login thing is so that, let's say you're at a big 3D competition, somebody else can't walk up to your servos with an Android phone and mess with you and reverse the servo or change your settings. This servo is now paired to this login on Theta on the app, so nobody else can tweak these servos while I'm not paying attention, for all of you people that think you're funny. The only way to do that if you sell the servo is you want to restore it to factory defaults via the app and then sell the servo. So if you ever do sell one of these and you've programmed them, do be sure and reset them to factory defaults. Alright, so we're going to go back to the servo and we're going to press this startup button again, and then we're going to write to the servo, and it says write success. So now I can go ahead and unplug it here, and I'm going to move the servo to precisely get this horn straight up and down right between the two holes. Now with the tail servo, it's not, dead critical, it'd be perfect, but it's just nice anyway to get it as close as possible. Let's go ahead and plug it in now. And our servo horn did not move because it read, basically when I bumped it, it locked in the value of where the servo was located, and now this is our new center point. So as you can see, there's our center. Dead on 90 degrees. There's our tail servo programmed. Alright, so with that done, let's go ahead and install the screws in these two servos. So we're definitely going to want some Loctite for that. I'm going to use blue Loctite for this purpose here, and then we're going to install the servo balls on the end as well. This is one screw you do not want coming out. Go ahead and get these tightened down. That's our two horns ready, and the next thing we need to do is install the balls in the horns. So let's start with the tail servo, and in this case you're going to install a nut on the end of it. So First thing I'm going to do is just get the ball through the plastic, and it looks like it's a 1.5 millimeter here. So just going to get this to go through the horn first. Then we'll put some Loctite on it, and then we'll get the nut on the back side. Now the reason I do this is that what I don't want is Loctite on the plastic composite. Plastics in general can be made very brittle by Loctite. So the one thing I'm going to check here is this a lock nut? And it sure looks like it's a lock nut. So we're not going to use any Loctite here until the nut snugs up. There we go. That is our servo ball on our tail servo. Put that aside, and then we're going to bring our Cyclic servo in. Now, when I install balls in Cyclic servos, and it's metal to metal like it is here, these servo arms are threaded. I'm going to use red Loctite, because if the servo arm is damaged in a crash and I order a new one, it's probably going to come with a servo ball, and even if it doesn't, I'm probably going to want to replace one anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and dip this in red Loctite. I'm going to work all the extra off on my finger, and then install it in the threaded metal servo horn here. And just snug that in nice and, not nice and tight, but just snug it in and then give it a little bit of a something something. You don't have to go crazy tightening these things. The Loctite will do its work. And just like that, we've got our horn or our ball installed in our servo horn, and then we can go ahead and get these mounted in the fuselage. But here's something I recommend you do at this point. So we've got our two servos ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and put those aside because I've got those with the horns facing the right way. What I'm going to do is, while I have all this stuff out, I've got, my battery, my servo tester, all this stuff for the servo horns, I'm going to go ahead and flip ahead a bunch of pages in the manual till where the next two servos get installed. It's not till page 27. You can take a look at it here, and you can see that both shafts are going to point down, and then the horns are going to go in opposite directions from each other. So let's go ahead and get those done at this same point now. I'm going to go ahead and take these two servos, tuck them aside for much later in the build, but they're done as well. So while we had everything out, we just went ahead and do them, and then we'll pull in our Cyclic and tail servo and our section of the fuselage and get that going. I'm just going to go ahead and clean up the bench here of our servo tester in pieces, and then we'll be right back. Okay, so we're going to start with our Cyclic servo. This is the Razer C1. And then it's going to go, just like we saw in the manual, with the servo horn towards the bottom of our frame and the ball towards the front of the frame this way. So we're going to take it in this direction and slide it into the fuselage. Now, and what I'm going to do here is just get our servos kind of started in opposite corners first, and then I'll worry about getting all 4 screws in, and then I'll worry about tightening them down, because as you install the servos, you may have to loosen some other pieces. These servos are going into pieces we've already installed. So in the case of up here, it's the metal plate at the bottom of our alignment, or anti-rotation rather, piece. And here we're going into, at the bottom, the top of our tensioner pulleys into that bracket. So, and I may have to loosen, this guy or these two guys and the idler pulley here, and kind of move it around a bit to get this to go. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. I'm going to break this bolt here, loosen that guy up, which will give this some wiggle room. And I'm going to break these two guys here. And this just will allow this whole tensioner to move a little bit while I get this screw in. There it goes. See? Now before I tighten this, I'm just going to go ahead and retighten these tensioner bolts before I forget about them. Alright, now I can go ahead and send the servo home. I'll tell you that these, aluminum brackets on any helicopter, not necessarily this one, if you over tighten these bolts, you will start stripping threads and doing bad things. So now we've got our elevator servo in, and this thing is not going anywhere. That's rock solid and centered up nicely. So with that, let's go ahead and move to the next page. So there's a few things to point out here in this menu, right? First is for your tail servo horn, they point out you want about 16 to 18 millimeters in that range as a guide, so make sure your horn fits those requirements. And then if you read this warning number here, basically what it says is depending on the tail servo you use, and we'll go ahead and switch to the overhead camera here. So depending on the tail servo you use, there may be some interactions between the tail servo, which goes with the horn facing downward in here, and the cyclic servo. So you can kind of see it in, see the best camera angle here. So right now, if I were to install this stock, I actually can't. The ball is hitting the other servo horn in here, and I'm trying to get the best angle on that, but you can see that's hitting. So what XL gives you is in the kit, they give you these spacers, and these are meant to go on this side of the frame, you know, here and here. Obviously you put them on both sides, and you can use as many as it takes, and it depends on your servo and the servo horns and everything else that you need to space this servo this way enough such that the horns, the servo horns, won't hit each other, and that the tail push rod can move freely. And then you want to check this at all extremes, so you'll move your cyclic servo horn. Again, it's really difficult to get a good camera angle in here, but you'll move your horn all the way up, all the way down, and just check interactions. You know, imagine you've got a tail servo swinging far one way, and you've got to get the servo the other way. You know, you need to make sure that the balls won't hit each other. So it's not just about, you know, this hitting here at the, you know, right above the spline. It's about that the balls don't hit each other. So I'm going to go ahead and muck about with that a little bit and try and figure out how many spacers. It looks like it's easily 2 or 3. And they give you kind of a lot. So they give you a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you could take as many as 3, and it feels like mine might. And I'm going to go ahead and play with this a little bit, and then I'll be back to you once I figure it out. Okay, so basically, in my instance, I needed 3 washers per side, and I'm going to go ahead and now install this here. I had to sort of stack it all up because getting all these washers in once this thing's in place is going to be really hard, so I'm just going to sort of get each screw started in turn just a little bit, and then kind of work my way around once each one is started, because I can't get them too deep until I've got the other side kind of aligned and in as well. And I'm just going to have to go kind of around the horn, going a couple turns at a time in each position, because this is kind of a lot fussy, honestly, to get 3 washers on here with the bolts through and Loctite in there and get it all aligned. But I think stacking it all, Loctiting it all, and then going this way around the horn is definitely the way to go. Okay, and with that, our tail servo is in there. It's not going anywhere. Okay. Now, let's make sure they can't hit each other in here. So again, we're in this weird camera angle. I'm trying to get you in here. There we go. We can sort of... There we go. So now you see the 2... Let me get something other than my fat fingers in there. Servo balls in here. Here we go. In here. And basically what we need to make sure is that the cyclic servo can go through its full range of travel and not be hit by the tail servo when it swings back this way. So if you look in here now, I can actually get these to swing past each other. So there's a slight, oh sorry, I'm going to come back, there we go, oh, all the way, there we go, tilt it this way, there we go. So there's a slight gap here between these balls such that they clear each other. It took all 3 washers with the Thetas here on the tail servo such that these guys would clear each other. With two, they were actually physically hitting each other, so the third one was definitely needed. So with that, we've got our two servos installed, one tail servo, one cyclic servo, and we are ready to move on to the next step. So the next step, if we take a look at the manual here, is to work on our battery tray system. So the first thing we're going to do to get this piece ready is to take all these little tiny bolts out of the top of our battery tray piece here, and then we'll go ahead and get those cleaned and then just basically reassemble all the bolts going down into the battery rails here. So I'm going to go ahead and get those all cleaned, and then I will get them Loctited and drop them into here, and we'll come back when we have this as a finished assembly here. So pretty straightforward step right here. Okay, so that was pretty straightforward. Only thing I would say is go ahead and get all the screws started one at a time before you drive them home, and then get all the top ones seated. I'm going to go ahead and pull all the screws out of the side, get those cleaned as well in preparation for what's next. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll be right back. Okay, so the next step, we're going to take this battery tray piece and join it with our frame assembly. So you can see here it's going to go in this kind of alignment here. So it essentially will bolt through just like so. So I'm going to go ahead and get a couple things ready, and then we'll go ahead and do this step. Let's just take a quick look at the manual over here. You can see essentially the same thing. So just FYI, some of the screws that come up into the bottom of the upper frame assembly were actually in those frame pieces earlier. So you may have pulled them out, you may have cleaned them and put them back in, which is what I did. So I like to keep things kind of together. But when you get to them, if you can't find the screws, they may be in these plates already. So go ahead and pull these two screws out, and these two screws right here were already in the plate. So let's get some Loctite going, a little more here, and then we'll go ahead and get this assembly on there. And I've gone ahead and pulled the screws out of the side of the battery tray assembly already and gotten those cleaned. And so with that, the frame rails will go down, obviously, and we're going to have to kind of finagle this. I would suggest let's get a little bit of Loctite on one of our button head screws. And these are likely button heads, just so that they'll clear the battery and the tray when it slides in. So again, anytime you have one of these steps that has a whole lot of screws being installed, it pays to just lightly put them in and then call that good, and then we're going to wait until we get a lot more of these in and aligned before we start to snug anything up. They've given you kind of these bigger slots for these screws at the back here, so there's a lot more leeway in those. And then when we get to these two here, obviously the tolerances and these two here get a lot tighter. So that's another reason to not tighten the ones in the back too much, because you're going to want the position of this thing to be set more by the tighter tolerance screws. But getting a few of these loosely in there helps get this going. So your 6 button heads go towards the back of the heli here. Whoops. Another good reason to use a textured mat. The screws don't go anywhere when you drop them. Generally right where you left them. Unless you're very unlucky. And in total in this step we're going to put 8 screws in. It's 6 of the... What are these here? These are 3x6s. And those all go at the back. They're the 6 we just put in here. Again, none of these are tightened yet. We're going to wait until we get these 2 teeny guys in. We have a 1.5 mm driver. And these go into our lower bearing block. And I'm going to guess that our next step is going to be maybe adding the sides to this, which is... I don't know, I feel like at the end of this episode we may have this thing on skids, which is always kind of a nice, exciting part of the build. Alright, so now that I've got all these screws in, I'm going to go ahead and snug them all down, and then we'll come back after that. Alright, so as I expected, the next step is going to be adding our side frames to our upper frame, or our lower side frames to our upper side frame assembly here. But before that, what we're going to do is we're going to take this piece, put it aside for a little bit here, and we're going to work on adding some pieces. We've got a couple of brackets here that are battery tray guides, and then we have the battery retaining spring clip we're going to go ahead and add to the side frame. So I did that little trick I always do, is I want to make sure that there's not a left and a right side frame, or if there is, which one's which, is you check the part numbers on the pages that mention them, and they both mention the same part number, and I don't see any differences as well, so these are both identical. So at this point we're going to make one of them left and one of them right. So take one, set the other one aside, and then what we're going to do is grab these battery tray guides here, and then we're going to take the correct one and attach it to what will become our left side tray guide. So if we take a look at the manual here, you can see that we are going to be attaching this piece here. Now, the interesting thing about these is if we go to the next page, you can see we're putting the other one on here as well. And one of them is going to have threads and one of them is not. The right side guide uses no threads because the bolts go through it and then bolt into this retaining clip, it looks like. So on the left side, we want this tray guide has threads in the holes. So that's what we're going to go ahead and look for here. So we've got our two tray guides here, and then I want to find the one that has threads in the holes. That looks like this one. So we'll go ahead and take the bolts out of it. So it's the one with bolts in it is the one you want for this first step on the left side of the frame. And go ahead and take these out. And then we'll clean them real quick here. And just to show you that I actually do clean every last single bolt, every now and then I'll do one on camera. Since there's just two here, we can do it. So I just put a little acetone on a paper towel and then run the screws through it. And then we've already got some Loctite going here. So let's go ahead and orient this here. And we've got it, just looking at the pretty picture here, looks like it's going to go like so. Just going to loosely, you can see there's a hole here in the screws. So that's going to go like that. Screws are going to come through the opposite side into here. So let's go ahead and get some Loctite on these guys. The screws go through the upper and lower holes here. So we'll put the screws through, and then the guide goes this way. I'll show you in just a second here. Just got to get this screw started. And we'll go ahead and get the other screw, but it's going to go like that. When it's done, let me get the open end here points towards the back of the frame here. So I'm just going to snug up these bolts here, and then we will put this frame aside. And this is now our left side frame, and we'll tuck that aside. Let's grab our now right side frame and get that in. Alright, in a second I'm going to give you the most important tip that I will offer on this if you have not built an XL Power helicopter. And we'll even tell a little story. Okay, so we've got our other bracket piece here. We're going to just flip to the next page of the manual, take a quick look at it, so we can see that we've got our right side frame. And again, I always orient the parts in reality the same way as they are in the manual, so we can take a quick look. We see the pin goes through. We can see that the bracket runs up and down, and then the jaw points towards the outside like this. So here's our jaw pointing towards the back. We've got our bracket running up and down. Let me get the screws cleaned, and then we'll be able to show you how this all goes together. Again, I know people have a lot of different preferences for cleaning bolts, and some use oil tolerant Loctites and some use orange Loctite, and there's lots of ways to do this. This is just how I decide to do it. So in this case, the bolts are going to go the other direction. Last time we went from the outside of the frame into our battery tray alignment guide. Now we're going to go from the inside of the frame towards the outside of the frame, and then we're going to go into this guy. Get it into our bracket here, and then I'll snug these up, and then I'll show you what this looks like, and we'll talk about that all important tip. Okay, so this is what this looks like now. So we've got our battery tray spring release piece. See, it comes this way. And then our alignment guide with the open end of this jaw towards the back of the frame here. Now, here's the all important tip, and this is not called out in the manual, and it really should be XL Power if you're watching this. This guy here, the spring clip, these threads right here that screw in, right? You'll screw this in all the way. You need to put red Loctite on this. When you buy this assembly, it comes all together. There's no reason not to permanently bond it. Every XL Power V1 owner I've seen that had the same clip on it, and I'm sure the V2 as well. If you do not Loctite this battery retaining clip into here, it will come off in flight. And I have a lovely set of blades with a ding in the leading edge where my V1 clip came out, because again, it wasn't mentioned in the manual there either. And it went through my blades. I was lucky enough that I heard it and saw something go flying, and I was careful. So what I'm doing here, I'm actually just using an awl to get Loctite just where I want it, and I'm running some red Loctite in the threads. You don't need a ton. Just kind of putting little dabs in around, and then I'm just going to go ahead and screw this in to here. Oops. And so yeah, it went through my blades, and there was essentially nothing holding the battery pack in but the canopy at that point. And I managed to keep it level. And there, now that's not coming out. So it still springs, screw it all in, let that dry, and then you're good to go there. Alright, that's my one big tip. So, y'all owe me a helicopter if you don't do that, and you watch this video. Alright, next step from here, we get to put some side frames on the helicopter. So I went ahead and cleaned all of the other bolts I pulled out of the frame. We're just going to add some spacers in a couple of key locations, and then go ahead and bolt the whole thing in. Should be pretty straightforward by the looks of things. Then we're going to add some canopy mount pieces as well. So before we dig into the step, just a quick note about our front canopy retention pins. So these two pins here mount to these little carbon sort of oval pieces, and then attach to our side frames. Now the one time I'm going to deviate from the manual is I'm actually using these canopy magnetic mounts. So they go in the exact same spot. Essentially this magnet bolts in right where that post would have bolted in, and then it just attaches the front of the canopy via magnets as well, which just makes it easier to get on and off. So slight deviation with mine versus stock, but these canopy pins are well called out in the manual. So I'm going to go ahead and set these aside and get to cleaning bolts, and then we'll come back and start putting all this stuff together. Alright, this next step is not hard, but you got to be kind of slow and methodical and make sure you're lining things up in all the right places. So let's go ahead and dig into it now that I've got everything lined up. So first thing I want to do is I want to grab my right side frame, and I've gone ahead and I've oriented my upper frame the same way it is in the manual, and we're correct, and we've got our side frame with the hook set in the same direction as the manual, so we've got that all good here. So I'm going to kind of rotate this on its side in hopes of this starting to make sense. And what you can start to see is how this is going to go together. So clearly needs to happen is this tray, the whole piece is going to kind of interlock such that it hits the guides and these go in, but then we've got to get all these little screws and bolts to line up as well, and it's not quite going. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen these two bolts just a little as we get this in. Tuck that wire out of the way to help you guys see things a little better, and this is started. There we go. Now I can get this to line up properly. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is take some of these little tiny screws and just get one of these pinned such that it's in the right spot. So we get this guy right here. And this is just going to do a lot to help hold things in place. Of course, it doesn't want to go in for some reason. Am I in the right hole? Yep. Button head should be right here, lined up with the hole. We'll get this one in. Alright, so again, I'm going to leave that loose. I need another one of these tiny little button heads that's going to go right here. And then we'll start adding in our angled spacer next. And it's important to note that the other side of the frame uses some different hardware and bolts in some of the same locations, so they're not identical. Went in first try that time. Alright, so I got these two loose here. Alright, this third guy here gets another one of these teeny guys. Don't be shy making puddles of Loctite to work with. Honestly, I throw out all my tubes after about a year because Loctite does expire over time. And I've never finished a tube, and I've built many helis in the same year. So don't let that get you. Alright, so now we can work one of our canopy magnets. Again, I'm using the magnets here. You'll be using the stock piece, and essentially this sort of recess here is where the little bolt on the back here is going to sort of tuck into, and then so, and even the little recess that the bolt on the back side of the magnet or the canopy pin fits in, you know, is meant so that this can sort of bend out of the way. All systems got some give. All right, this sort of barrel spacer here is going to go right in this front hole here, but I'm going to do the back side here first. So we've got these angled spacers in here that are going to go essentially right here in the frame. They're going to go underneath, and on this side of the frame we're going to use 3 of these M3 by 25 millimeter bolts. And before you panic thinking you need 3 for the other side, you don't. The size changes on the other side, because I just had a panic and went, wait a minute, I don't have the right thing. So don't worry about that. Go ahead and get some Loctite on the end. You don't need to Loctite all the threads because most of it's in the spacer doing nothing. And then we'll line this up starting at the back. And this goes through the spacer into essentially our boom brace. Keep that loose at first until I get all 3 of these in, and then we'll drive them home. So again, just Loctite on the tip is needed. Through the spacer into the boom brace. And then this last one goes into, I'm assuming it's the bearing block under there. It's kind of hard to see, but same length bolt. Alright, now we got enough of this stuff in here, we can start actually tightening these down. So I'm going to tighten these 3 bolts through the spacer down. Okay, there's those 3. I'm going to tighten our battery guide again. Now that it's snugged up, I'm going to get these little button guys tightened. Again, on these little tiny ones, be cautious. It's really easy to over tighten these, pop the heads off, cross thread them, you name it. So just snug them, don't go crazy. Just go through here and into this barrel bolt. One thing I didn't see, usually these barrel bolts have a hole in them so you can hold them with something while you tighten them, but we'll just hold it with our hands. A little extra Loctite there. Alright, so just quick look at the manual here. We got these 3 bolts here, we got all our little guys here, and that's good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and flip this over, and then we'll take a quick look at the next page of the manual here. Okay, so looking at the manual on the next page, you can see pretty similar layout. However, when we get to the back, the size of the bolts change. You can see those red bolts in the back. Those are M3 by 45s, and we use only 1 of the 3 by 25 there. So let's go ahead and get things going here. The pin here will obviously go on the outside. We may have the same difficulty with the alignment with this guy, so I'm going to go ahead and, well, I guess let's try it first. See if we get lucky in terms of alignment with our little holes here. this side just about went perfectly right away. So yeah, no need to loosen it on this side. That's all lining up great. So let's go ahead and get one of these tiny guys in as kind of an alignment pin to sort of start holding things together. So we get some Loctite on this guy, and we'll get one of these guys in. The same one on the other side was a little fussy. Try the front hole. Just make sure our pins are aligned here and our... Oh, they're not. That's what's going on there. So it's probably nearly impossible for you to see, but the tray has to align perfectly with the alignment guide. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen this guy. Probably have to take it all the way out. And so what's happening is these two little jaws here have to, let me get it in some better light, there we go, have to go right into the rail. So you gotta kind of flip it over, get them aligned well. There we go, that's better. So we'll have a good alignment there. Let's go ahead and resync that guy. Okay. I think we should be good now. We'll know for sure quickly. And that's kind of the nice thing about starting with these little screws, is that if you're not aligned, you will quickly know. So they don't have a whole lot of tolerance. All right, let's drop the front one in. That one went right in that time, much better. Okay, that's a good sign. Again, when you're building one of these things, take your time. If something is not aligned, it's for a reason. So stop, pause, look around, figure it out. Don't just go hammy on it and try and get it done. So that's those three. Might as well do our front barrel spacer. Yikes, making a mess over here. Alright, so at this point, we just need to do our canopy piece, which oh, see? 1.5. I put this guy in the wrong spot. That should be the canopy pin. So this guy actually goes towards the back here. There. Get him in. Great. Let's get our canopy screw, which is stuck to our magnet conveniently. Right here. That's better. So there's our canopy guy. We got these guys all done and tightened. And now we got to do the spacer piece. So here's where things differ from the other side. So we've got these two giant 45mm long bolts, and these will go in these two top positions, and then the same 25mm bolt that we used on the other side will go in that position. So let's get the 25mm bolt dropped in the front position here. What this bolt is going to be doing, if you look at the length of it here, it's actually going to be what tightens the boom clamp. So I bet there's a note in the manual here that says don't tighten these. So it's actually going to go through this spacer and then through across this bridge here, and eventually we'll tighten it down and it'll clamp onto the boom. So we'll put some Loctite on it. A little bit more of the thread will get Loctite on it here. Get this in there. And I'm not going to go crazy tightening this bolt because obviously I need to be able to get the tail boom in, so I'm just literally going to, as soon as I feel it stop, I'm going to snug it, and we'll just break that Loctite pretty easily when it comes time to install the boom another day. Not going to get to that tonight. And then again, this guy, same thing, it goes all the way through into the boom clamps. We're just going to stop right there rather than snug it up. And with that, it's starting to look like a helicopter. We got something that approximates upper and lower frames here, and it's looking good. Okay, a quick note about skids. There are two kinds of people in this world. Alright, not really, but let's have a little fun here. So a bunch of skid parts here. The skids that come with the kit are black landing gear, black skids. I'm just not a black skids guy. I'm a white skids guy. So I've got these. I ordered them when I ordered the kit, so I would have them ready. So these are going in the spare parts box. or on the floor. And I'm going to go ahead and get these white skids back. So again, these aren't stock. This is a personal preference thing. There's no difference between them, but I'm going to go with white skids on mine. All right, landing gear. Super straightforward. You take these little blocks. You bolt them to the top of the skids. Make sure the XL Power logo is facing to the front of the helicopter and upright. So I'm going to go ahead and get these bolts in, and then we're going to go ahead and install them on the frame. Okay, one quick note I will make is that keep all of the bolts on your skids completely loose until you have everything installed and you tighten the skid pipes into the skids, and then I start working around and going back and tightening everything else. So these, you know, little black metal bars here on the top are super loose. In fact, this one's actually a little tighter than I want it to be, so that I've got plenty of alignment room to keep everything loose. So with that, the next step calls for us to go ahead and get these bolted into the frame. So I'm going to grab that and we'll take care of that. Okay, now it's time to get our skids into our fuselage. So looking at the points, it's essentially the two peaks in the frame. And we'll go ahead and get some Loctite. So the rake on the skids goes towards the front, so this is the front side of the helicopter here. I'll show you, it'll make sense visually in a second here. And then again, I'm just gonna super loose so that this is completely floating free. Don't want any resistance yet until, and I need to be careful because it's 11:30 at night. I'm rushing because I want to get it up on skids and then call it a day because I'm a little tired. And I gotta be extra careful now because here's where I start making dumb mistakes. And I will say, one of the things I do like about doing these build videos is that it takes time, but that also means that it stretches the build out, so you get to kind of enjoy it for a lot longer. Alright, so now we can go ahead and slide our skid pipes in. And just kind of slap them in there real quick. And then we'll work on finessing later. So, at this point, I've got the skids in. Let me take you to an overhead here. So I've got the skids in. They're, you know, super loose, but they're in enough that, boy, it's funny. There's something about the angle of the camera that makes these skid angles look like they're not the same. I assure you they are. When you look at it from some different angles here, you know, you can see here, yeah, that angle they look the same for whatever reason in the overhead. Something in the lensing makes them look off, but they're not. So now that I have the skid pipes in, I'm going to go ahead and tighten our bolts, because this is enough to get the skids in alignment, and I can go ahead and tighten up. So now I got the other side around. Again, skids aren't tightened yet, but I'm going to go ahead and tighten these bolts. Then I'm going to flip it this way, and I'm going to go ahead and tighten the 4 bolts here at the bottom. So we'll go ahead and get these tightened. Again, I just wanted to wait till I had the pipes in here. We'll set the actual pipe position in just a second. Now for my least favorite part of a helicopter build. I hate putting the grub screws in the skids. It's a pain. They never seem to want to go in for me. I don't know. Everybody has that one step that they can't stand. Okay, so I'm going to use this guy because it's just a little easier to get stuff started. Again, I still haven't positioned my skids. All I'm going to do right now is try and get these stupid grub screws. Helicopter manufacturers, if you're listening and you have a better idea than this, I'm all ears. I'm just going to, I want to keep the skids loose, but I want to get all 4 of these started. Alright, so now we're going to flip this back over, and we're going to go do that dance where we try and get the skids so that they look good, one, and that we like how much of the sort of tail is sticking out of the skid here. So we're going to decide how much of that we want, and then we're going to measure it, and then we're going to match it on the other side, and then we have to decide whether we want our skid pipes straight up, towed in a little, which is what I usually like. It's just aesthetic. It makes absolutely no difference, unless maybe you're doing sliding autos. There might be a way you like for better than the other. But people will make fun of you if your skids are not the same length. So take your caliper, figure out which side aesthetically you like. side looks good to me. I'm not overly fussy. I tend to like a little bit more of the skids to stick out the back. And that just means that when you take the battery pack out, it has a little bit more skid to kind of lean on before it falls over. Alright, so somehow we managed with exactly 51 millimeters sticking out. So we're going to set the other side. Again, this is also personal preference. And that's our other side perfectly matched. So all we need to do now is set the toe. So we're going to be really careful as we move this around not to alter that. And I think I'm just going to roll them ever so slightly inward. And then I'm going to go ahead and gently pick this up and tighten these goofy little grub screws until they bite. And then the last thing I do is once I get all of these tight, it's biting. And I'll show you how I check that. So when I think I might have it, I'll grab the skid and I try and rotate it. And this moved way too easily. So I'm going to make sure I still have the right amount of toe in I want. And I've got to keep tightening. The trick, and this is why I hate this step, is not to over tighten. Which means I should stop talking and start listening. You can hear a little bit. It kind of sounds like crunching a tiny insect. And they start to bite. So let's try that now. Yeah, see, that's not moving. I'm going to give them just a tiny midge extra. Alright, now I've just got to match the toe in. I've got them the same depth, but I want to turn the skids in the same amount. That looks symmetrical to me. Then I'll go ahead and tighten this side. And then the last thing I'll do is once I get these tight, is I just put a little dab of medium CA in behind the screw. It just kind of helps lock it in place. But before we do that, we got to put it on its skid and take a picture or two. Throw it on the Hangout, right? So now we have, let's move a little further back so it shows up on camera, a helicopter sitting on its skids. So, it's starting to look like a heli. Next up after here is to add some more servos, but it's close to midnight here on the East Coast, so we're going to call it a day here. That's it for episode 3, and we have ourselves a heli sitting on its skids. Thanks for watching. This is Hack TV, and I'm Nick Wisdom. We'll see you on episode 4. Thanks.